Knoxville, Tennessee. June 1899. Samuel Harbison arrives with 614 slips of company paper carrying $1,678 in face value. The slips promise coal from the Knoxville Iron Company. They are not banknotes. They are paper issued against workers' earned wages inside the same system that sells them fuel and keeps their accounts. And Harbison is not a miner. The court record calls him a licensed securities dealer. He sent agents among Knoxville Iron's workers and bought their coal orders. Before a new Tennessee law, paper like this had sold for about 75 cents on the dollar. Harbison paid 85. A worker surrendered $1 of purchasing power inside the company system and received 85 cents that worked outside it. Harbison took the restricted promise back to the company and demanded the full dollar. The company refused. So on June 2nd, he sued. Inside the company system, the paper was worth $1. Outside, 85 cents. Somewhere that rejected it, nothing. How could $1 change value when it crossed a boundary? And who controlled that boundary? To answer, we have to follow company money from a worker's hands, through the store and cash market, into a family's ledger, and finally, the Supreme Court. Because the most powerful part of company money was never the token. It was the company around it. Follow the money. This is Greenback Files. Company scrip had no standard form. It could be a metal token, cardboard punch card, coupon book, or bearer order. Some pieces named a denomination. Others promised coal or merchandise. The material was not what separated scrip from ordinary money. The boundary did. A United States dollar does not ask who employs you. Company scrip does. The folk version says a miner worked all month and received his entire wage in private money. That happened in some places and periods, but in many documented coal operations, scrip worked differently. It was often an advance on wages already earned. The mine kept a running account. Between cash paydays, a worker could draw part of his accrued earnings in coupons or orders and spend them at the company store. On payday, the operator started with gross earnings, then subtracted the scrip, store purchases, rent, fuel, medical charges, blacksmithing, powder, tools, and other entries on the account. The balance came out in cash. That sequence changes the story. The family did not necessarily receive a full cash wage and freely decide where to spend it. Company charges could be removed before the cash balance existed. The revealing number was not how much paper the company printed. It was how much cash remained after the company finished subtracting. At Knoxville Iron, the mechanism appears in unusually sharp detail. The company had about 200 employees and held one cash payday each month, on the Saturday nearest the 20th. But that settlement covered work only through the final day of the previous month. In practice, cash wages stayed roughly 20 days behind. During the wait, workers could obtain coal orders each week. The court record says roughly 3/4 of earned wages moved through those orders at this company. The lowest paid workers earned about 90 cents to $1.20 a day. And they sold the paper, in the court's words, to get money to live on. Not to speculate. To live on. Why build payroll this way? Many mines and lumber camps opened where there was barely a town. Companies built houses, roads, stores, and services for the workforce. The employer knew what each worker had earned and could collect an advance through payroll. An outside merchant could not. Scrip also reduced how much currency an operator had to transport and protect. And for a worker, early access to wages could be genuinely valuable. Hunger does not care that payday is 10 days away. A company order could turn labor already completed into supper tonight. That defense was real. But look at what solved the problem. The company recorded the labor. It issued the advance. It sold the goods. It collected the charge. It calculated the balance. Then it decided how much cash crossed the counter. Convenience and control were not two different systems. They were the same ledger seen from opposite sides. And what that ledger did to a family depended on what was written above and below the final line. Imagine a worker earns $20 during a pay period. Before payday, his family uses $6 in company scrip. The account also carries $3 in rent, fuel, or other deductions. At settlement, he receives $11 in cash. That is 55% of gross pay in money that can leave the system. The other $9 have not vanished. 6 became goods before payday. 3 paid other charges. But the worker can no longer decide where those dollars go. The decision happened inside payroll before the cash balance reached his hand. This is an illustration, not one miner's historical account. Change the store bill, the rent, illness, or the number of working days, and the result changes. Historical mine samples show how wide that result could be. Across different firms, places, and periods, the cash remainder on payday ranged roughly from 30 to 80% of payroll. That is not a national average. There is no responsible national percentage for how many American workers were paid in scrip. There was not even one experience inside a single mine. At one West Virginia operation in December 1906, Surviving Payroll Research finds workers at both extremes. Nearly 12% owed the company money on payday. Nearly 20% received between 80 and 100% of their earnings in cash. Same mine, same month, different lives. The payroll usually named the man underground. The consequences entered the whole household. Groceries, rent, credit, and the cash left after deductions shaped the choices of everyone in the house. Demetrius Woodson was born at Kaymore Bottom, West Virginia, in 1922. When the National Park Service interviewed him in 1980, he described a childhood scene from the Depression. He placed it around 1932 or 1933, when he was about 10 or 11. His father was working, Woodson remembered. But the family had no food. His father went to the company store and asked for $1 in scrip. The request was refused. Outside, a sack of beans had split open. Woodson gathered the spilled beans from the ground, carried them home, and his mother washed and cooked them. This is one man's memory, recorded almost 50 years later. It does not prove that every company denied every hungry family an advance. It shows what control over an advance could mean when one family had no alternative that day. A system can be credit and still ration credit. It can be a lifeline and still decide who gets the line. And the token itself was only one way to build that power. What mattered was whether value could move to another store, another landlord, another town. At Knoxville Iron, one company dollar bought $1 of coal inside the system. Outside the system, that dollar developed another price. The gap between those prices is where the private money becomes visible. The company store does not sell everything a family needs. Its paper cannot pay a tax bill, buy a rail ticket, or settle with an outside merchant. So someone with ordinary currency buys the restricted dollar at a discount. The worker gets cash now. The buyer uses the scrip later inside the company system. The gap is the price of liquidity, the cost of making private purchasing power travel. Before Tennessee changed the law, Knoxville orders had traded around 75 cents on the dollar. Harbison's agents paid 85. A worker who sold a $1 order surrendered 15 cents to get money that worked somewhere else. That discount does not tell us the markup on flour. The cash discount priced escape. The store markup priced goods. They were different prices, and confusing them produces bad history. Elizabeth Alexander Lambert saw the cash market from the other side. She moved with her husband to Nuttleburg, West Virginia, in 1924 and later operated a company boarding house. When the National Park Service interviewed her in 1981, she remembered workers coming to her on weekends with scrip drawn in advance. They needed cash. Lambert gave them 75 cents for each $1 piece of scrip. Then she used the paper toward her grocery account at the company store, where she said the boarding house received a 10% discount. Follow the dollar. The worker gives Lambert one restricted dollar and receives 75 cents in cash. Lambert carries the company dollar back to the store. Her own purchasing arrangement makes it more valuable to her than to the worker. The number printed on the paper never changes. The bargaining position does. Lambert's account is a memory told decades later, not a national survey. But a 1934 federal investigation found the same kind of cash haircut across a much larger sample. The National Recovery Administration examined company stores in 10 eastern states, where commissaries and scrip were especially common. It collected detailed information from 150 company commissaries and 100 nearby independent stores, then checked another random group of 35 commissaries. The investigators found food prices at company stores averaging between 2.1 and 10.4% above nearby independent stores in the areas studied. That is not double, it is not triple, it is also not zero. More important for the scrip itself, the committee found cash conversion discounts of 10 to 30% widespread. A $10 company claim could become only $7 to $9 when the family needed lawful money. The liquidity loss could be larger than the grocery price gap. A family might tolerate a modest food premium and still lose 20% when an emergency required rent money, a ticket, or something the company store did not sell. The federal report found few cases of direct orders, forcing workers to shop at the company store. Then it made the sharper point. A poor family could be pressured without a command. If the company store was the only merchant willing to advance food against wages, need could do the coercing. So, did the store force them? Is too narrow. Who else would extend credit? How far away was the next merchant? Could that merchant accept the paper? What did conversion cost? How long could the family wait? In 1899, Tennessee tried to change every one of those questions with a single legal exit. It did not stop Knoxville Iron from printing orders. It made the promise redeemable in cash. Tennessee's law took effect on March 17, 1899. It covered certain employers using coupons, scrip, punch-outs, or store orders for labor. Under specified conditions, on the regular payday, or at least 30 days after issue, a worker or bona fide holder could demand face value redemption in lawful money. If the company refused, the holder could sue in his own name. The remedy was carefully chosen. As the Supreme Court later emphasized, there was no prohibition against issuing the orders. A worker could still accept one and spend it on company goods. The law added an exit. Harbison built a business around that exit. Knoxville Iron stamped the orders as accepted and set aside Saturday afternoons for the process. Coal was credited at 12 cents a bushel. Harbison's agents moved among workers buying the promises. He presented them under the law's payday or at least 30-day redemption conditions and asked the issuer to honor the new cash right. Knoxville Iron refused. The company argued that the law interfered with freedom of contract and unfairly singled out certain employers. The facts made that argument difficult. Workers were not selling the orders merely because the paper was accidentally inconvenient. The company deliberately kept cash wages roughly 20 days behind. Lower-paid workers, the record said, sold the paper to get money to live on. The Tennessee courts awarded Harbison $1,000, $702.66, including interest plus costs. Then Knoxville Iron took the case to Washington. On October 21, 1901, the United States Supreme Court upheld the law. The majority accepted that it limited contract, but it treated the limit as a valid use of the state's police power, a way to improve the worker's position and reduce a source of conflict. The decision did not create a national right to cash. It did not outlaw every company token. It made Tennessee's particular promise enforceable. Across the country, states attacked different parts of the system in different ways. Virginia required face value redemption language for selected industries. New York went further for specified employers, requiring cash wages and prohibiting store money orders. Other laws failed, changed, or left exceptions for merchandise checks between paydays. There was no single American scrip law. There was a patchwork of answers to a patchwork of instruments. But redemption changed the economics before it eliminated anything. Knoxville paper had traded near 75 cents. Harbison paid 85 after the new right was in play. A credible path to face value could raise the outside price even while the paper still traded below par. Law did not make the order federal currency. It made the issuer's promise harder to escape. That could weaken one form of leverage. It could not change the town around the paper, the company house, the private road, the mine guard, or the threat of eviction. When those forms of control collided, store freedom became part of a much larger fight. In the coal fields, freedom to buy from another merchant appeared beside demands for accurate weighing, higher pay, union recognition, safer work, and the removal of private guards. Company scrip did not cause the mine wars. Reducing those conflicts to a token or grocery price would erase the fights over organizing, housing, eviction, guns, and state power that made them wars. But the company store made the structure visible. It was the everyday counter where employer power entered the household. During the Paint Creek and Cabin Creek strike in West Virginia, beginning in 1912, workers and operators fought through 13 months of eviction, tent colonies, armed guards, and state intervention. A regional pay dispute widened into a struggle over who controlled life in the coal camps. On the night of February 7, 1913, an armored train known as the Bull Moose Special moved through the Holly Grove tent colony. The National Park Service identifies one of the men killed as the Italian miner, Francis Francesco Cesco Estep, shot while trying to protect his pregnant wife. There is no verified free portrait that lets us place Estep's face on the scene. What survives is testimony, public reports, and the settlement that followed. Governor Henry Hatfield's April 1913 settlement included the right to trade at independent stores. It was one term among many, binding the company counter to the company house, the wage scale, and the armed conflict around them. 7 years later, a different archive shows how far a company store account could reach. On July 26, 1920, 18-year-old Matt Wisniewski and 7 other men died in the Powder House explosion at Sublet Mine No. 6 in Wyoming. They were waiting to have powder containers filled. A mine inspector concluded that a spark ignited the powder, while a wooden implement punctured a keg. Company records list settlement sums after the deaths. Beside Wisniewski's name, 2 account books record $1,000 paid to the Frontier Supply Company, the company store. The line is chilling. It is also unresolved. The source does not establish that the entire amount settled a store debt. It does not tell us why the payment went to Frontier Supply. It does not prove that Wisniewski's family received nothing else. Closing those gaps would mean inventing the most dramatic part of the story. So leave the line where the archive leaves it. An 18-year-old worker is dead, and a $1,000 entry in the aftermath points to the company store for a reason we cannot recover. The uncertainty does not weaken the evidence, it marks its boundary. Company accounting could follow a worker far beyond the store counter through payday, housing, strike, injury, and death. But what an entry meant depended on the place, the rules, the account, and the person. Now the ledgers have to face the legend. Did they show a universal debt trap? Or something harder to summarize? The folk version says every miner was paid in useless tokens. Every store charged 2 or 3 times the normal price. Every worker sank into permanent debt. And Washington banned it all in 1938. The opposite story says scrip was merely a convenient advance constrained by competition. Both are too simple. Economic historian Price Fishback found that scrip in his bituminous coal evidence was commonly an advance on wages already earned, not the entire final wage. Historical samples put the payday cash remainder across a broad, roughly 30 to 80% range. Some workers owed the company. Others received nearly all their earnings in cash. Systematic 1922 food comparisons did not show universal doubling or tripling. Selected company stores were about 4.2% above nearby independents in 2 southern West Virginia comparisons and around 7% higher in Alabama. But the 1934 investigation still found 2.1 to 10.4% food gaps in its sample and 10 to 30% cash discounts. A modest store markup and a large liquidity haircut could exist at the same time. Fishback argued that workers' ability to move constrained operators, that mattered. It did not make bargaining power equal. A single mobile worker and a family in company housing did not face the same cost of exit. Distance, transport, information, language, segregation, family costs, and blacklists changed what just leave meant. Lawrence Boyd's later work found stronger local market and distributional effects outside the prime age miner category. Pullman makes the boundary clear. Its workers were paid in cash, not scrip. The company's leverage ran through wages, tied housing and rent. Private tokens were not required when the employer controlled the surrounding network. Fishback defeats the claim that the worst version was universal. The case records and unequal exit costs defeat the claim that the system was harmless. The sublet store ledger captures the ambiguity. Between 1914 and 1916, it recorded $12,275.49 in cash sales and $74,574.65 in coupon sales. Cash was about 14.1% of that store's transactions, not the share of wages paid in cash. William Harris and his wife remembered high prices. Harris also said that when influenza hit a family hard, the store continued to carry them on credit. The same institution could feed a sick family when no other merchant would lend, set the terms, collect through payroll, and dominate a market built on its own paper. The sharper question is power. Who could say no? Who could wait? And who had somewhere else to go? Woodson's father needed $1 and was refused. Lambert could exchange a company dollar because she had cash and a use for the paper. Harbison bought 614 claims because he had capital, agents, and a new law. The promise was similar. The bargaining position was not. And the law that supposedly ended the story in 1938 did nothing so clean. The popular ending arrives in 1938. Congress creates a federal minimum wage, company scrip becomes illegal, and the system disappears. Only the first part is true. The Fair Labor Standards Act set a 25-cent floor for covered employees. It contained no one-line ban on all scrip. It allowed the reasonable cost of customary housing and other facilities to count toward wages in some cases. The first wage and hour rules drew a boundary: actual cost with no profit to the employer. Then a Florida barber shop showed what the boundary meant. Pevy Wilson Lumber Company used coupon books between its twice-monthly paydays. The coupons bought merchandise in the company store. Their printed terms said they were not transferable. Cash redemption came at 90% of face value. Around January 1939, the cashing operation moved into Homer Ett's barber shop. The symbol writes itself. A worker could receive a haircut and take a haircut on his wage in the same room. Etty paid 90 cents for each dollar in coupons. For the opportunity, the company raised his monthly rent from $40 to $75. When it saw what he earned from the exchange, it demanded 40% of his margin. When the arrangement ended, his rent returned to $40. Wage and hour inspectors arrived in March and again in July 1939. As federal litigation approached, Pevy Wilson stopped issuing scrip on November 3rd. Newly ordered coupon books sat unused, costing the company nearly $500. The federal court decision came in 1943. Discounted coupons and company store deductions had repeatedly pushed workers earning the statutory minimum below the floor. The court enforced the rule that employer facilities counted at actual cost without profit, and that the minimum had to reach the employee free and clear. Then the judge included the detail that destroys the clean ending. If the cash wage had been a few cents higher, the old method might have operated without violating the wage provision. The FLSA did not make every coupon transaction vanish at midnight on October 24, 1938. It made it unlawful to use the arrangement to undercut the floor for covered workers. Enforcement arrived through records, inspections, negotiation, and lawsuits, company by company. The explicit federal language saying scrip, tokens, and coupons were not proper payment media under the Act appeared in a revised rule published in 1962, not in the original 1938 statute. There is no honest single date when all American company money ended. Different forces weakened different parts of the system. State cash and redemption laws made private promises more portable. Unions attacked tied trade and deductions. Roads, cars, and mail order widened the retail market. Federal wage enforcement limited what an employer could count. Company towns declined with the industries that built them, and some practices survived as store credit or wage advances after the metal token disappeared. The system did not end with one switch. It lost pieces of its power: the exclusive store, the captive road, the unredeemable paper, the wage below the floor, at different times in different places. Which brings us back to the man who found a legal exit before most workers had one: return to Knoxville. Harbison paid workers 85 cents for each company dollar, then demanded full value from the issuer. He won. The decree reached $1,702.66, including interest, and the Supreme Court left it standing. The ruling did not ban every private token. It gave the holder a choice. Under Tennessee's law, Knoxville Iron could no longer insist that its promise was worth $1 only when the holder bought what Knoxville Iron sold. The holder could choose cash. That was the power scrip restricted. Not always value inside the system, but movement outside it. And because the issuer could also be employer, landlord, merchant, and lender, the most powerful part of company money was never the token. It was the company around it. This has been Greenback Files. Follow the money.